Welcome. Oh, geez, we're already on the first slide. Let's go back. Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today for our Arkio live stream. My name is David Morgan. I'm going to be your host today as we go through a special live event that we're going to be focusing on design education and how the process of integrating Arkio and other immersive technologies into the academic environment's been going. We have a bunch of amazing guests that are joining us today that will help us kind of give a wide range of experience and perspectives towards how their process has been going with integrating and pioneering the leading of Arkio. Just pioneering the actions of Arkio or the actions of immersive technology in design education. So, the purpose for today is to share and highlight some of how Arkio is already being used in other classrooms and what that impact has been, and some of the key results that you can actually start to take into your workflow and bring that into your classroom setting. So we're very happy to have everyone here. So let's just jump right in and look at what the agenda has on for store today. Okay, cool. So first, like I said, we're going to introduce our special guests. We'll hear some very exciting perspectives from them, the stories they have to tell. Along with, we're going to have a special highlight from Simon Harrison from University of Nottingham, especially around the VR lab that he's been setting up and the process that he's been going through there. And we're going to take a moment that I'll be going over some of the Arkio education, where we are with Arkio and education, along with some of how we got here and what exactly you can do to get up and running with Arkio today. And finally, we'll get to maybe the main event or some of the more exciting parts, which is our panel discussion. And we'll be bringing our groups together and having a larger insight and a bigger conversation around what exactly, some of the key things that they found in their research and application of VR. And of course, throughout this process, you can use the chat in order to ask any questions to our reviewers, or just suggest how you're feeling. It's a great time. So just to make sure it's working, make sure to leave a comment where you're tuning in from, if you've been using Arkio before, or just how your day's been. It would be excellent. So, and as I kind of work through my ability to not feel like I'm stuttering every time, I'm going to welcome in everyone else and start to bring in the group. So it's nice to see some people already joining. So let's start with welcoming on our team here. So first, we are going to bring in Simon Harrison. So Simon, welcome. Very nice to have you. I'm excited to bring you on as a guest here. I met Simon about a year ago when we first started talking, and he is the digital learning director at University of Nottingham. When you first reached out, it was very fun to kind of get a sense of what you were hoping to bring with using Arkio in education, especially in your lab, and some of the key details. And I'm just excited for you to share some of the technical achievements that you've already brought into your lab. So welcome, and if you want to say a quick hello, go for it.
Thank you, David, and hello, everybody.
Nice. Thank you so much. Excited to hear from you. So, all right, let's keep this ball going. So, and now I'm going to send you back and throw in Dr. Kevin Jones. So, Dr. Kevin Jones reached out to us. Where am I? There we go. So, Dr. Kevin Jones reached out. Okay. Let me retract a little bit. I'm getting excited. So Dr. Kevin Jones is the director and senior faculty at Indiana University of Columbus, or Indiana Columbus, University of Columbus. I always throw the of in there. And when he reached out to us, he brought in a very unique opportunity for using Arkio in the academic setting. And he was trying to understand how you could bring in an engaging application and a framework for students to understand how they could bring design thinking and into innovation solution to help improve the performance of organizations. So, and this has been a kind of a first on my side. And I think this has brought a unique perspective towards what and how the application of design in VR really works. So welcome. If you want to say a quick hello, go for it.
Well, hello, everyone. Glad to be here today and glad to be with David and this awesome panel. So
I know
forward to our conversations.
I love it. And I like this room setting we have. It's like we all have the same architectural style. God, it's great. All right. Well, thanks so much. And we're going to move on to our last and final, but another great person with a great architectural style for a backdrop. Oh God, this inside joke is just so beautiful when you're trying to explain it live stream. So Claudia Trzynski is an architectural designer and instructor from Boston Architectural College. I'm hoping I didn't butcher your last name. But...
A little, but that's okay. We'll get through it.
Okay, thank you. I actually have I met Claudia many years ago. She was a former student of mine when I was focusing on pushing a class that was bringing VR as a design tool into the academic setting at Boston Architectural College. And I've seen Claudia grow very well, both within just using VR, but in the technical side. And now she's leading the charge of bringing Arkio and other design tools into the Boston Architectural College as an instructor. So welcome, Claudia, if you want to say a quick hello.
Yeah, hello. I'm very excited. So I'm looking forward to this panel. So can't wait.
Well, welcome everyone. Let's get the full crew up here because you guys can see our little inside joke of us adoring our little Zoom backgrounds. And I'm very excited to have all three of you on here. And before we get into the discussion, I thought we'd first start off with what we were mentioning before, with Simon's experience with the VR lab in Nottingham. So we'll step out and give you the spotlight, Simon, and jump right in. So here we go. All right.
Thanks again, David. So my name's Simon Harrison. I say I'm an associate professor at the University of Nottingham, and I've been teaching VR for about 4 years. My background is industrial design, worked for many years in industry, and then came to teaching, say, 20 years ago. And I've been teaching VR for 4 years. So if we could have the next slide, please, David. As I say, I've been teaching for 20 years, and across all sorts of different subjects, from hand sketching to CAD systems, manufacturing, all sorts of different topics. And when I came to do VR, I kind of just thought, yeah, it'd just be like another class. I'll pick it up as we go along, easy. I was shocked. It was the hardest thing I've ever taught by a long stretch. You're effectively blind. You can't see what the students see. For somebody who's teaching a kind of a visual discipline, this was really tough. The students are asking you questions and you can't see what it is they're talking about, and you end up playing a guessing game with them in terms of what their problem is and how they need to fix it. And it was tough. We had about 7 headsets in a small studio. We still have this little VR lab, and this is a picture of it here, you can see. And I used to teach small groups of 7 students at a time. And, you'd sort out one student's problem, and you'd turn around, there'd be 6 hands in the air, all wanting help. And it was continual like that for an hour session that we used to run at a time. 7 headsets doesn't go far when you've got 50 students to teach as well. So you become very limited in the amount of time you can give each student the training within a course, basically, within the university. And not only that, is you can't teach anymore because you can't see what they're doing. You can't see where they're going wrong. You can't even see what see whether they're doing what you've asked them to do. You could say, can I create a sketch of a 3-dimensional sketch of a car for me? And you don't know whether they're drawing flowers and butterflies. You've got no idea what's going on. So it's tough. And 2 years ago, we decided that this little trial that we'd run for the first 2 years was successful. The students loved VR. They loved it. And the benefits it brought to their design process were really noticeable, particularly, obviously, with large items. If you design something that's large, for architecture, everything you do is large. So it really gave them a sense of scale, which they couldn't do from a series of 2D sketches or hand renders or whatever it was they'd done before. So it made a real difference to them. So 2 years ago, we decided to scale this up. And if David, if you can move the next slide, please. And what we didn't know was that we were creating what we believed to be the world's largest VR classroom. We just knew that we needed to provide these facilities to larger student groups. So the program I teach has about 50 students a year, but some of our other courses in our faculty, architecture, have about 150 students a year. Mechanical engineering can have sometimes up to 300 students a year. 7 VR headsets was never going to cut it. So we needed to get a large number of headsets in one space that we could teach this software that we wanted effectively and economically. So we knew the room. We knew that we wanted to have these headsets out of the way. We didn't want, when we weren't there, we didn't want people coming in and playing with the equipment and potentially breaking it. And at the same time, we needed that room quick to set up. So if a class came in, we could deploy the headsets with minimum fuss and effort. So the strategy was to put them in the ceiling, out of the way, out of arm's reach when they weren't in use, and then lower them when needed. And the room we had in mind for this with a high ceiling enabled us to get 40 headsets in, and these are tethered headsets. So they're all connected to high power PCs, and we run Steam VR as the operating platform for this. But that still wouldn't have allowed us to teach in the way we wanted to. And so what we implemented existing technology. We didn't create anything new. We just brought different technologies together, and we took some classroom management software and linked it to the VR and the Steam VR system we had, and came up with a system which allows us to remote in and see exactly what the students are seeing in their headsets, and to some extent be able to control what they're doing. We can certainly talk to them. We can launch applications, shut applications, share files, even blank their screens if we want their attention. So we've got quite a lot of control now in there. And this allows us to teach that sort of numbers before. And I think some of the software we used to teach, they used to talk about needing 1 academic to every 5 students. I've taught on my own the 40 students. So I've done 1 to 40 instead of 1 to 5. Although 1 to 20 is better. One of my colleagues, Chris, who normally will take a class with me, we can handle 40 students quite easily in a class and give them a good learning experience. So, everybody wants to know about what this is like when they come down from the ceiling. So I've got a little video next. If you want to play that for us, that would be great. Thank you, David. And this is the money shot. This is the bit everybody loves when it plays. I think it's going to stream soon. I hope. Yeah, here we go. You get gasps and oohs and ahs even from the students. It never seems to fail to amuse them, in all honesty. But we have this little cable system winch that lowers the headsets down. They can't access the headsets until we want them to access them. So it means they're not fiddling with things while I'm trying to teach something or explain something at the beginning of a class. And once I want the headsets deployed, we lower the headsets, they take them off, and within a few minutes, they're inside the Steam environment and launching the applications they need. So again, if we go to the next slide, please, David. Yeah, one more time. It's a good video. The upshot of all of this, because it worked, we spent a fair bit of money, really, and it took us about a year to source and to design this system. But the upshot is we have a really effective VR teaching room now where we can actually teach. In the past, I felt it was more of a self-help class. We provided them the equipment. I'd hang around in the room and they kind of had to teach themselves. Suddenly I have a system which allows you to teach it as you would do any other software class. So I can see what the students are doing. I can almost effectively peer over their shoulder at what they're doing and notice if they've got some bad techniques or are missing an opportunity with something. I can guide them, and we can really progress their skills much more with this system. And I think the other thing that's important is that it allows us to give the students more time. If we've got 50 students and they've got 7 headsets, they don't actually get much time in those headsets in a teaching term or semester in the US terms. Now we can get 14 at a time. We can give them sort of maybe 7 times the amount of time in VR than we could have done before. So it enables their skill levels to be so much better as well within the timescales that we've got to deliver the teaching. And if we just move on to our last slide, please, David, if that's okay. And yeah, I've not talked about Arkio yet, and we do use this, and we are promoting this to our architecture students. The hardest thing in all of this process that we've been through in the last year and a half is not the technology or the hardware or even the software, it's people. And we've got several members of our faculty, myself included, who are using this facility all the time and teaching some great bits of software to our students. But trying to bring more academics to use it is sometimes difficult. I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted in this course, in this webinar today. You're all interested in VR, but all those academics who aren't that interested, there's a barrier to change. They don't really want to do it. It's kind of like it's an effort. They're not sure. They don't know about it, and persuading people that there's real benefits here is always the hardest bit. And what I'm doing actually for this coming year, which I know will be successful because I've done it before with other things, is not to target the academics, but to target the students. So we're going to be providing this software and these resources several afternoons a week as an open resource for the students to come and use. And I know that they'll take it up because students tend to be much more interested in trying new things and different things. And I know that will eventually get back to the academics. So I think we're trying a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down approach as to how we introduce these technologies and softwares to our faculty. And I know it's going to reap the benefits, and that these softwares and this technology can make huge differences to outcomes, to student outcomes. You can do stuff, as you all know, that is just too expensive or too slow to do in any other way. Size is always a barrier with making models, prototypes, anything that helps the design process in that way. And VR cuts straight to it and allows you to do that really quickly. And we went with Arkio because we tested quite a few different pieces of software in architecture, in all honesty. And this just seemed to work nicely on large models as well as on small stuff. We brought some fairly hefty 3D models into Arkio from Revit, and it handles them. We felt really well. So this is the software that we've been proposing to our architecture department within the faculty, and the feedback we've had so far is they love it. David, I'll hand back to you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Simon. I'm just, whenever that money shot happens of everything dropping, it is just
Everybody
perfect.
loves it.
Yeah, and there's definitely a really good, some really good discussion for us to have there around just the culture and the community for pushing these things, because you can make great software, but you have to have people practicing and applying it. So I think this
people are always the hardest thing to manage and control. It's never the technology.
Definitely. So, but all right, so we're going to jump right into the next part. Thank you, Simon, so much for this presentation. Again, everyone, if you have any questions throughout this chat, please feel free to reach out and just throw a question into the chat. We'll be monitoring and making sure we grab all that as we go. So, all right. I see some people I know in the chat already. Perfect. Friendly faces. Always great to be building community, especially what we were just talking about with Simon. So, all right. Now, I'm going to be taking a little bit of the stage to talk about Arkio in education, and particular the resources that you can use today to get yourself up and running, along with why and how we got started with this, because there's a little bit of an interesting story here. So let's go to here. So as a few of you might be familiar with, my background is in architecture, and I always had this really interested passion for how people, what the process is like in the design world. And I used that to focus in on my thesis to kind of explore how virtual reality impacts our physical existence. And from there, I was able to kind of push and do some more research within a professional setting. And flash forward a few years, I was able to discover Arkio, and I was able to discover Arkio through reaching out with Hilmar, our CEO, and I came familiar with how the tool worked, and I was able to just understand that this was a great tool to keep pushing forward within my research, and kind of move forward a couple of years when I got reached out to again by the BAC to think about teaching a virtual class at their curriculum for their distance students. So I was able to actually take some of this work and think about how can we actually use a course for architecture students to think about how they can actually design and review and create a social environment just like a studio space, but in a virtual setting using using VR and different MR technologies. So so now we flash forward again a couple of years to, and we started actually, let's flash back. Geez. In 2021, we started right away, and we just hit the ground running with a lot of ideas around how this would work. We had about 6 students that were kind of spread across all of across the world. And right from the start, we were getting in with like the bare bones of how this was working, and the whole goal of this workshop was for have people use VR to do the design and modeling and review. And so you can kind of see back in 2021 when we just had the basic avatars and students were starting to figure things out. And then as this technology continued to advance, we kept adapting and moving the course and evolving it to have more students and to figure out the best ways to incorporate that stuff. And a lot of this actually led to some interesting discoveries and results that just became clear with even the first few semesters. right from the start, we were noticing that from the students that were using it, there was an increased value within the social engagement side. So whether we were in like a fully remote or in a hybrid setting, I was actually starting to see students engage with each other online and in person, thinking about their space more dynamically. And and this probably resonates with a lot of the teachers out there or instructors, but this was the first time I ever heard students ask for more group projects. I've usually, as someone that went through studio work, I always was scared of it, but it was interesting to see how much students were connecting with each other while using Arkio to, go through the modeling process, share their design work, and connect over space and actually feel a little bit more connected to each other in a space that is owned to them. And then there was also the technical side with the process of actually their skills with modeling. Over time, I noticed that a lot of the students were actually getting better at crafting form and having a better understanding of scale and proportion. They were getting in this space, and a key thing with this, this course is that all of the work that they created in here had to be done in VR. They weren't using other tools to model, or they weren't using other tools to meet. Everything had to be immersive in this way. And it was interesting to see how this type of experience defined how people created, and they actually helped tune in some of their scale and understand the importance of creating experiential space. And the last thing that I really like to hear, or the last thing that was really interesting and probably one of the more engaging parts, was talking a bit about how the review worked. A lot of times when we started doing the first part of this, a lot of the times we were holding up these panels to do a review, and students were just kind of going through the motions of how it worked. And it ended up causing them to not really be sure of how to use an experiential space to present. And right from the start, right after the first time we tried that, students started to realize that they could be engaging with their peers to see how their performance of the space went, that they were finding different ways to gain value of how they were interacting in this space. And it was just really interesting to see how just within a few semesters, how students were already thinking differently of how to engage with their peers and within their space, and creating more value and understanding of how their architecture is performing. And so from there, this was me just being a community member of Arkio, and I was in touch with the team, and I really wanted to think about how we could take this idea of what we were learning from Reality Check and expand it to all the other universities that are engaging with Arkio. So I jumped aboard the team about a year ago, and we've been focusing on how do we improve and upgrade our educational environment to really create this community that helps push what this industry wants to bring with the immersive modeling. So our goal with Arkio, with education side, is to make sure we're equipping all of our future AEC professionals with the right skills and the experience to communicate through spatial design. And so with here, let's talk about how we're going to do that. So first, what we want to announce is that Arkio is free for education. It's important that we make sure that this gets in the hand of all of our education users, from students to faculty to instructors. You guys are people that are leading the future of this, and it's very important that we know and get the insight of how this tool works and involve it and bring it into how the product evolves. On top of that, on top of that, we have a couple of little bit more details that'll help you understand to get up and running with Arkio. Particularly, we provide we provide free pro licenses to all students, giving you access to the core features of Arkio and the plugins to make sure you have your connections to your modeling software. And we also have an active community that's a very great, valuable place to keep yourself involved with modeling tasks, or just how the community is moving with immersive modeling and design software like this. And this is a great place to share your feedback, compete in design challenges, and just stay networked with others like-minded individuals. And then for the institution and faculty members, we also offer a similar pro license, but we also know there's more organization and deployment strategy there. So we offer floating licenses to all institutions that will help kind of fit your needs within your studio space. And of course, we also offer resources for onboarding and making sure the process with getting Arkio into your curriculum is easy peasy. That's the official term here. All right. Now, on top of just the technical things, we talked a bit about the community side for resources. And right now you can go to community.arkio.is. We'll put that in the chat channel for you. And you can easily get started with jumping into the community, sharing your work. On top of that, that's where we announce our design challenges, where you can enter in there. And that's a great place for any student or any individual that's creating with Arkio to win prizes and be recognized as an individual creator in the community. And then on top of this, we also have our learning materials, because, one part is not just having, a very stable and functional software. It's important that you guys have the tools to get up and running with learning. And on top of the fact that we have, our resources on our Learn page at arkio.is/learn, along with our technical guides that help you a little bit more step-by-step on our help center, which is at support.arkio.is. We also have our tutorials within the app itself. So there's a lot of resources that can fit multiple ways of getting yourself up and running within using Arkio. And it's just a matter of figuring out how it's going to fit with you. And the best way to get started with that is this next slide, which is our application. So today we've released a new page on our website at arkio.is/education, and we'll put that in the chat right after. And for there, you're able to get up and running with using Arkio. You can send in an application to let us know how you're interested in using it, and that helps us just get connected with you and make sure you get a license right away. So we'll post this into the channel, and if you're interested and want to get Arkio started in your institution today, you can just follow that channel. So, and of course, if you have any questions or questions or ideas, please reach out to us on our community channel, or feel free to leave a comment in here. And you can also reach out at hello@arkio.is. A lot of things you can do, but we'll be posting those things in the panel or in the follow-up for this. But now let's join and get the rest of our group back in here, because I've been talking enough and we need to hear from everyone here. So welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for hanging out, and it's great to see that we're still all in the same space. And so right now we're going to dive into is that we have I've sent you guys a couple of questions that will help formulate the conversation, but I wanted to first pause and just say, what do you guys think so far of what we've been showing? Like, is there any ideas that's resonating with you guys, or like you got any inspiration for new projects after seeing some of the work that we're sharing?
Well, let me say I appreciate the restatement of the resources that are available, because so much of the development of the capabilities can't be taught. As Simon talked about earlier, it's difficult to teach, but with the resources, you can direct students to resources and they can take advantage of those things. And then you can coach along with which resources they should use, and so on and so forth. So I appreciate you showing that and reminding us that you're not alone if you delve into Arkio.
No, never alone. We're here as a team, But yeah, well, let's get right into the first question then, which is we're going to be looking at what was your main motivation to integrate immersive technology into your curriculum? And I'm going to pose this question right to Dr. Kevin Jones. Tell us a little bit more about what was that first piece that really got you going?
Well, first thing is I do not have an architectural background, nor are my students architectural students. These are business students. And business students initially will wonder, well, why are we designing? Well, because with business, the problems that we face today are too complex to have simple solutions. So we have to critically think, problem solve, and collaborate. So I take a social constructivist perspective, okay? So students are co-creating with each other their knowledge in real world context. So with that being said, why Arkio? Well, Arkio is a tool which enables students to create realities that may not exist, for them to think through how the future should be in organizational change, which is what we teach, organizational change, how they can work together to share ideas on how the future may be. So Arkio is one of the tools we use.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And do you feel like that really helps students grab a lot of that maybe some of the hard things that are like difficult to grasp when you're not in the design background, like being able to integrate some of the organizations and, some of the process for understanding how space is, going to impact how the business performs?
Absolutely, because when we think of organization, okay, organization is within some form of space. And if we're talking about physical buildings or we're talking about virtual space, we're talking about a systemic view of an organization. And so how people, stakeholders, various stakeholders engage with the organization, this gives us a tangible way to talk about how, for example, customers may engage with the business, how they may interact with members of the business. So by creating these spaces that we create, we give students a chance to think about, okay, this is how potential stakeholders, customers, for example, may interact with you and your business.
Mm. Do you guys? So now I'm going to send this over to Simon, and just to kind of get some insight with thinking about how you've seen a range of different design students and not just design students, but a range of students in general start to dive in here. Do you feel like this is starting to kind of resonate in a similar manner when you've established this VR lab and bringing more students into that engaging environment?
It's interesting how many different disciplines want to use VR, and actually in different ways as well. We came to this as an industrial design course looking at as ways to prototype things economically that were too big to make in a workshop. You know, we had students designing kind of motorhomes and things and interiors for them. And, you know, there's no way we're going to build a full-size motorhome for them to test things. Yeah. But actually, it's really cost-effective to do it in a VR situation. Mm-hmm. They're going to build a CAD model anyway, put it into VR, and actually understand the size and the spaces around you. So this is where we came from. This is what we were trying to achieve initially. But we've now got people from our med school who are learning to good bedside manner, how to deal with patients, how to talk to them properly. And AI being integrated into VR is an amazing thing coming through, where you can have conversations with an AI avatar, and it'd be natural, and the AI avatar will respond back to you. So VR as a whole is opening up so many doorways. But I think for design, the real benefits, and particularly for architecture, I mean, you can't prototype a house or a building. You don't put one up to test whether you've got the design right. You put it up, and the first time you really experience it is when it's finished. You can make middle models, but you don't understand that space. And, virtual reality gives a new opportunity, a new prototyping technique, really, for architects to understand the space they have before they commit to spending large sums of money actually putting it right and getting the design right. I was given some data to test for Arkio from some existing design students architecture students in the University of Nottingham. And their brief was design a house which is a very small footprint, compact space, but try and get as much living space into this property. And they looked great as a Rivet model, fantastic. And then I experienced them in VR, and I noticed they'd reduced the width of the staircase, and suddenly it felt so claustrophobic. It's like I couldn't get a cat to pass me on these stairs. It's so tight. And the students who built this would not really understand the psychological feelings that their design would have on the users. And I think VR enables you to do that, and you couldn't do it in any other way without spending considerable amounts of money and time also.
Yeah. I think that's a good segue over to talking with Claudia, because I think as someone that's gone through, the process of learning, and as one of the great details that Claudia first came at with when she joined the class was that she didn't want to use VR and almost stopped wanting to do the course because it had a headset. But I think the process that you went through only just totally went the other way and brought you in to be invested a bit more. So I'm kind of curious, talking about the idea of becoming a bit more aware of some of the architectural qualities of space while going through an immersive design tool. Kind of curious how you from when you started to how to now, do you feel like this has impacted your design process in that same way?
Yeah, definitely. After hearing from Simon and Kevin, and I'm also learning a lot from you guys already discussing this whole thing, since I'm a new instructor into integrating Arkio into Boston. Yes, like David mentioned before, I wanted to right away quit a few years ago with VR because I was so against it with everything. But after giving it a second chance, I was like, you know what? This is a great tool. I don't know what was I thinking, but since Boston is basically a home, basically many students focus on learning architecture and design, And since we overall like teach like the main heavy softwares, like including Revit and Rhino and like 3ds Max, and I feel like Arkio is a great forward-looking tool that will help future in our designs. So like given the rapid of space of technology growth, I believe it's essential to expose students into these innovative platforms like Arkio. So yeah, I feel like it's a great way to, that's why I kind of started instructing, because I feel like it completely changed my mindset of from where I was years ago and till now teaching it. So yeah.
Well, I was very interested too in some of the, like when you first started to really kind of craft the smaller spaces to larger spaces. And a lot of times, like when we go through these kind of processes, like we were always trying to have students understand the impact of like how much you can change while you're in a immersive space, because we're just so used to what we can do with a flat screen that we always think we have to apply the exact same process from that. And that's like kind of what we learned within the review process, you know, like we're opening things up a little bit more. All right, we see some questions coming in here. I'm going to go to the second question here for you guys and talk about some of the challenges, because realistically what we've been kind of facing is there's some challenges with bringing this type of technology on, because there's new things with bringing in. And I'm kind of curious to hear a little bit more around some of these key things that might have, you know, defined some of the steps that you've took versus, you know, might have been, you know, something that you're waiting to see it, how it changes or grows. So I'm going to pass that right back over. Well, actually, I'm going to throw this over to Simon just to kind of get it here, because I feel like you have a lot of different perspectives here for this.
Sorry, can you just simplify the question for me? Repeat, because
Got it. All right.
Maybe your point. I do apologize.
No worries. So I'm just kind of curious to hear a little bit more around the challenges you face within the adoption process of bringing, you know, VR or Arkio into your curriculum. You know, is it, like you said, you brought up the idea of how people are just around attitudes and getting people involved there.
I really do think it's generally people are the sticking points. I find it really hard to come up with any argument, rational argument, that would say that VR is not a useful tool in the design process. It only adds. But of course, it requires people to learn new skills, to do things in a different way, to change. And I think Kevin, you were talking about change management, weren't you? I think at one point, or business change. People don't like change. You know, so they're so resistant to it so often. And this is the hard bit. The technology is easy and straightforward. Technology does what it's supposed to. It works or it doesn't work. People change their minds. They have judgments that aren't rational. And you're going to have to cajole them and persuade them. But I think anybody who starts to use VR or augmented reality very quickly picks up the benefits of, wow, I could do this with it. And their mind starts to race. The real challenge is getting them to try it in the first place. There's always a resistance. No, I don't want to put the headset on. No, I'll get motion sickness. It's not for me. You know, and once you can break that barrier and you can get them to experience something, you know, I would say you can't explain VR until you've tried it. You try to explain to somebody what the sensation is like, but until they put the headset on, they don't get it. And then once they've tried it, then they get it.
Kevin, what do you think about that? I feel I saw you nodding.
Yeah, no. Simon is spot on in the sense of, you know, you have to experience it before you can say you don't want to do it. And I can relate to what Claudia says, and you're not alone, Claudia. And put yourself in this mindset. A business student comes to a class of organizational change, and you tell them in week 1, we're going to be using virtual reality. And they look at you like, why? Well, but then we start talking about emerging technologies. We talk about the potential of technologies such as VR and other technologies. We have to make the case that they have to have an awareness of this, not just for the present, but for the future. And so it's essential to make the case. And I see a question about classroom versus lab, and mine is a classroom environment. And the idea is that you have to link it to the objectives of the course. And I repeat, it is problem solving, critical thinking, and collaboration. Somebody says, well, what about the focus? And some students wonder, well, I thought we're here to study organizational change. Well, guess what? There is no content I can provide you that can teach you this. You have to take the information I give you and then bring your own experience, work with others, and we use this tool to gain another perspective on how technology can change how we do our work. So the challenge is created in the classroom, and most students, not all, most students then embrace it. But then there's always some that will not like it because they want traditional education. They want me to just give them an assignment, do the assignment, get a grade. In my class, they struggle a little bit because that's not what it's about. It's about developing capabilities for performance in the workplace and also developing your capacity to learn. And if they don't like that, they do struggle a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like that brings up a lot of like, the general approach for how you want to be, jumping into this, because there is a lot of things that you feel like you have to relearn, but you also are just kind of in a new environment. You aren't using mouse and keyboard, you are doing things experiential. And even when it comes down to how we structured a lot of the homework in the course and reality check, it was always to think about the onboarding process. If a student, students aren't going to jump in right away to be able to do a 2-hour long modeling session. So you need to kind of break things down. And that is some of the tricky parts, but it also helps really inform the homework and the value of what they're getting at. So, and a lot of those workflows too, the challenges there really kind of went quite quickly. So, and I'm going to actually scoot over to the next question because I see some questions coming in the chat that we should also ask. But I want to get to this third one here. So in this third question, I want to pose to the group and is, in what way has Arkio what ways have Arkio influenced the design thinking and creative problem solving within your courses? And I'm going to send this right over to Claudia.
Yeah, sounds good. So overall, my past experiences with you, David, when you were teaching, which it was basically changed my viewpoint since I'm here. And the way I want to advance it is how, the way I structure my course is I split into two. So basically, the first half of the semester, I like to call it the 3D sketchbook, is where the students will be fully immersed into Arkio, allowing them to focus exclusively on design without the constraints of thinking about the structurals and thinking put little micro detailings or something like that. They could go think outside the box, let their inner child come out of them. And that's for the first half. In the second half, this is where I do like to bring in more of the creative problem solving. So I like to allow for them to work in mixed reality, also integrating their works into real world sites. So allows them to identify, analyze real world problems and use Arkio to create a solution that addresses that problem. No. So yeah.
And that's awesome. So that's
so.
The 3D sketchbook's really great because it helps bring a bit of it helps bring a familiarity to the students, because if you throw too many things that are different, they're just not going to they're going to try to make it work the way they think it should. And this is kind of like you're saying, you got to think outside the box and unleash a little bit. So be curious.
Yeah. So like you mentioned before, we have to step away from the keyboard and the mouse of just really just get creative, put those blocks, get into your 5-year-old little self and just design away. And then the second half is where we go back into, okay, how do we kind of do the design thinking of the architectural world? Bringing the creative side with the actual architectural forms. So, yeah.
Well, and so I'm kind of curious going over for you, Kevin. It'd be interesting to hear, some of maybe I know you shared at one time during our discussion that there was a group of students that really just jumped right in and they started they kind of unlocked a new type of creativity within that spatial design, part of the homework. And I'm kind of curious, have you noticed some of your homework or just how the courses have been impacted by integrating Arkio in this way? Has there been a difference in the homework assignments for you?
Well, basically, the learning in the classroom is scaffolded. Okay, we work our way up to VR. We don't do designing in Arkio in VR in day one. We work our way up because we're trying to teach UX design, CX design. We're just simply trying to get them to see the whole spectrum of organizational change. And so here's what happens. So we do a 2D design, we do a 3D design. Then we work our way into, okay, how can you replicate your 3D design in VR? And this is where we've had some very nice results, because the end product that we're trying to create is a form of it's called a new form retail entity as a part of an organization. We talk about all the implications of having that in an organization. So we take them to the VR after they have their 3D design and say, how can you replicate your 3D design in VR? And now the goal is to be able to walk through and experience and show the other classmates what it's like to be inside of your new retail entity. And that's where the good conversations begin. Because when you're showing a 3D design, it's like, okay, that's fine. That's nice. That's great. But it changes everything when we're now talking about, okay, here's my first floor of my store. Here's the second floor of my store. Here is why we arranged this over here. Let's walk over here. Now let's go to the parking lot. It changes everything.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's just, I think it's that ability to have things unlocked with with the ability to work on your projects in this way. A lot of times this is new, so experiencing this and applying the value is still part of that discovery phase. But it's from the results have, like you're mentioning, they've brought a lot of positivity that just I hope to kind of see the pursuit of this continue. I think there's a lot of other interested parties out there that can gain a lot from this.
And real quick, David, it's design thinking. Yes, we are not designers. We are not designers. I'm not a designer. We are doing design thinking. So we're just
100%.
trying to figure out creative problem solving.
Yeah, exactly. And I think within the kind of familiarity to the course that I was mentioning, like a lot of that is around process. It's not really, we weren't really trying to focus on how well you were designing, but more around how were you being impacted in the process. So that's where when you're trying to model a space that you would typically draw on a plan, how does that change when you're actually in the space and experiencing that? So the design thinking part is, I'm fully on board with that. And that's why I'm very interesting here. I'm actually going to bring up a question from the group here, or from the community. So let's see, how do we do this again? It is, here we go. Yeah, look at that. Ooh, fancy. All right. From Michael Keys. Hey, Mike, how's it going? Do any of the professors use VR in more robust tool sets, such as videos and PDF takeaways and etc.? And so I think, with this question, I'd be kind of curious thinking about, how do you share this wealth of knowledge with resources? Do you feel like you have to go through this one-on-one onboarding with students, or, how have you been trying to work through, sharing this knowledge with them up for the group, whoever wants to grab it?
Well, I'll answer a quick thing. The surprising thing about VR hardware is, you can use them as cameras. A lot of they have outward-facing cameras that are good quality, and they also have inward-facing cameras, so you can record what you're doing. And I've produced quite a lot of videos, not only of the VR experience in terms of what you'd see in the VR, but I've actually how to grip the handsets and how to hold them by filming with the external cameras. So the actual hardware itself can be quite a useful tool in creating some of this kind of material that you would use for training purposes. And if you want to start sharing models with other people who maybe don't have headsets, there's so many different ways. I'm sure if you use Microsoft, I'm sure your organizations may well use SharePoint. Did you know that SharePoint can actually host three-dimensional spaces that are capable of viewing in VR headsets? You probably didn't. It's part of the standard Microsoft build. It's a switch you switch on it within SharePoint. So once you have these models that you created in VR, there's numerous ways of sharing them. Even if you just outputted it as a 3D model in a 3D PDF, you could do it in that way. So there's lots and lots of options here.
Definitely. What about you, Kevin? Have you felt like that's similar, that you're using different options, or have you relied on one in particular?
No, we haven't expanded a whole lot because again, we are doing many different things in the classroom.
Yeah.
You know, our biggest focus, and that this is what I've learned in the last few iterations of this, is just learning how to use the tools. And why is it important to learn the tools? Well, because you're acquiring a different way of seeing, a different way of understanding. Because, like I say, none of my students, and I will say none of my students, come to the class with any design experience. So this entry into a completely different world of understanding is a revelation for them, without even focusing on whether or not we're going to do videos and I appreciate hearing what Simon says can be done, but we're pretty simplistic. We're just build something, build anything, see what you can build in this VR space, and then can you collaborate together with this? That's what we do.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to bring up, so I'm going to try to bring up this question, then we have one more for the group, and we'll try to fit this in nice and quick. But Gail, nice to see you again, Gail. Welcome back. Welcome back. And he was posing a question around just some of the limitations when you're trying to teach someone and walk through it with a 2D format versus, being in an immersive space. And I think this follow-up question brings up a lot of interesting pieces of how do you start to work with someone when they start to get lost in this program? Because, just like whenever you're starting to discuss or work through these steps, there's processes that you want students to go through in order to best understand how the software comes together. And I think even when you think about this in the spatial design part and you want people to experience your space, like I think a lot of times I've noticed courses have started, like students have at least started to jump on board with how this is actually going to work and have their designs help indicate how students should, like how the space should react. So I'm going to throw this over to Claudia real quick.
Yeah, sure. Since why not? Well, as a person who's just starting to teach, I don't have a direct answer to this, but from what you're, from teaching, well, not teaching, from joining into your class, David, from what I'm noticing when people are getting lost, I feel like it was a very successful, which I'll also integrate into my courses, is that when people are getting lost, I feel like they just have to play around with it themselves before getting into the course. And then, because I feel like if we just jump right into the course, and I feel like you're already wasting time. So I feel like I always tell my students, like, ahead of time, submit your assignments, and also play around with the hardware before getting into the class. And into the class, this is the steps that we're going to take, and then we'll go like step by step, basically, of how to integrate Arkio and how to not get lost into the space. Because I remember when I was in the class, I don't think I ever got lost, but I feel like I was very, like, motional sickness. I feel like that also another way we could get lost into the space as well. So I feel like you just have to play around with it. I feel like there's nothing much you could do with the instructor side. Like, I think Simon and Kevin says you just have to just get right in, push through it, and if you have the right mindset, I think you could conquer anything. Honestly.
So make sure you have the right button set, and first right mindset and the buttons. And I also thought about how you designed a lot of your reviews in order to not tell people how to experience something, but to allow them to discover it by using different ways of having, I don't know, like, I think you had like a scavenger hunt for your review and allowing students to kind of move through that, and that was really interesting to kind of bring up that idea of like how you use that interactive engagement to bring people in. So, all right, I'm going to swing right over to our last question here, which is a little bit more, putting our little future glasses on and thinking about what's the direction for design education that you hope to see? Like, how do you hope to see us evolving in the coming years? And I'll throw this up for anyone that wants to grab this first.
you want me to grab it first then? I'll
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
I think VR is here to stay. I think in the past, maybe it's always been a bit of a fad and the technology been around, but suddenly the price point, it's affordable. And I've seen a lot of industries now experimenting with VR and trying to use it within their kind of commercial sense. And I think it's here. And to me, VR is another tool. It's another tool in the designer's toolbox. Sometimes we'll draw on paper. Sometimes we'll use a CAD system. Sometimes we'll play around with bits of cardboard. Other times we'll pick up a VR headset and do something in VR. It's another tool. And, you know, the beauty of this tool is, though, it's the first one that really actually works. Because for going right back in throughout the human history, we've designed three-dimensional objects in 2D spaces on paper, on cave walls. You know, we to come up with ideas quickly, we do it in a 2D way because it's fast. Even a CAD system, it's 2D. You look at the monitor. It's 3D data, but it's 2D representation. And VR something allows us to actually design 3D objects in a three-dimensional space and do it quickly. And so as a tool, as these softwares develop and the headsets develop and so on, I do think this is going to be more and more prevalent as the go-to tool. And I think we've got to get students using it. And of course, the other thing, which I'm sure Kevin can probably add to, is AI. When AI starts to combine with VR, wow, it changes everything.
And Simon took words right out of my mouth there.
I knew I would do.
Right there. That's where the evolution of VR, the convergence of VR, AR, extended reality with, yes, AI, and don't forget this thing called robotics, okay? I won't go into all that together, but you see, with the various emerging technologies, and we've seen the future to some extent already when we look at the Apple headset, okay? Now, you know, we can't afford the Apple headset. We can afford the Quest 3, but that shows you kind of what's coming. And then we also see with the Ray-Ban glasses, you know, these things are coming. And as innovations continue and integration with AI goes forward, we're going to see more power, more opportunities. And yes, it is going to be a standard part of the classroom. Simon, you and I are on the same page, man.
Yeah.
Love it. All right, Claudius, what do you think?
I agree. I feel like as technology continues to advance, I believe the education will also evolve to be more like interactive and immersing. So I feel like the educational side of like Arkio and on the technology VR, I feel like it's going to be a mandatory course eventually down in the future. Yeah. So they always say like VR is the future. I think VR is already here. It's now. It's already here.
These are all excellent points, and I think from I think what was really exciting about having all three of you here is that there's not one similar background. You guys bring a lot of diverse perspectives here, and from us talking about the technical process of just getting what type of hardware into it, the fact that now it's in a more mobile state and not always tied to like a high powered computer, that things are moving to mixed realities like kind of approaches. I think there's a lot of things like you're saying that people have already seen and understand the positivity that comes from using VR in the design thinking, whether it's just to experience or to actually go through the design process. There's tools that allow us to understand things that we typically would have to rely on far into our professional, into our professional careers to experience how our space works. So I'm just excited that we've been able to put this together, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time, and for everyone that's joined us for these great questions to have this conversation. And
we'll be sending you a bill, David. So
perfect. Yeah, just make sure you mail it to me, like not physically. We'll talk about where that is. So all right. Well, I'm just gonna do a quick wrap up and just thank you guys very much for jumping in today, and I'll put you guys down into the hello side room. So if you want to say a little bye, there we go. All right, let's just do this. Okay. All right, so we're going to wrap up today. I just want to make sure that we pass around the resources that Kevin was mentioning would be like Kevin mentioned before too. Again, I'll put this in the chat, and we'll be sending this out within the newsletter too, that just for everyone that's RSVP'd for this. Arkio is free for you to start using today in your educational environments, from students to people running the institution and faculty. We want to support you in your process with getting Arkio into your curriculum. So you can easily apply today by going to arkio.is/education. There's a simple little form for you to fill out that will just give us a sense of what you need and get you in touch with myself or someone else from the Arkio team. And we're looking forward to seeing what you make. So don't forget to check us out on our socials at Arkio HQ. You can find us. We're pretty much posting all the time on LinkedIn and YouTube and Instagram. And we just started TikTok, so we're adapting. Oh, geez. And most importantly, make sure you join the community at community.arkio.is. That's a great place to stay in touch with us and just show us what you're making and get any questions that you might have with using Arkio. So thank you all for joining. It's been great to see some new faces in the chat. Hopefully you've all had a great day and you've been entertained with some of my subpar jokes. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much for joining. Bye-bye now.